This is Front Run Tech, and in this video we are going to talk about the Bitcoin cycles, and we're going to look at it from that lens, and we're also going to, kind of look at where we are right now in regards to the cycles, but we're also going to talk about the cycle in general and if it's even still in play or not. All right. So where we stand currently is that Bitcoin did recently make a new all-time high, but it was not able to impulse into a parabolic move or even into a next leg up. When it did make that new all-time high, it kind of immediately retraced back underneath the previous all-time high, and the sentiment in the market right now is kind of strange. Um, I would say that the market is pretty cautious right now, and a lot of people are somewhat worried about the cycle and about where we are currently. And there's a lot of sentiment out there worrying about potentially the cycle top even being in and a double top with a slightly higher high. This is kind of what a lot of people are talking about right now, and that's definitely from some PTSD, because that is what happened last cycle. Whether you want to look at the more macro double top with a slightly higher high, or the top that it put in towards the end of 2021, it kind of did the same thing, where it set the new all-time high and then slightly set it again, and then that was it for that cycle. All right. And people are comparing that to right now, wondering if the cycle top is in and we're getting that same type of thing. Now, to look at that, we've got to look at the context around what was going on in the last cycle when that happened. First of all, we got an absolutely parabolic move in the last cycle right here, at the end of 2020 into 2021, and it was an absolutely monster move. It was probably too much, too vertical at once. And this cycle, we have not gotten any type of parabolic move or price action, not even a little bit. So far, this cycle has been kind of methodical moves up with long consolidations, a move up, a long consolidation, move up, consolidation. So we aren't overextended at all compared to how we were in the last cycle, because we haven't gotten any type of huge parabolic move, right? The other big thing to think about when comparing these cycles and wondering if this is similar, a double top, would be that when the last cycle peaked, that was at the end of an easing cycle and the very beginning of a Fed tightening cycle. Okay, which I personally think that that is the main reason that Bitcoin topped and the bear market began. I would tend to put the most weight into that as being excuse me, the biggest reason that cycle topped where it did and the bear market started where it did. Now, where we are currently is we're in a totally different situation, because right now we're basically coming towards the end of the tightening cycle. Liquidity's already um, moving up, but we're going to be heading into the very beginning of a Fed easing cycle. All right. So when you take those two different things into account, this is a very different picture of where we are currently, and it's why I don't think there's a very good probability that we are seeing the same type of double top happening that we saw in the last cycle. All right. Um, Now, something that could be interesting would be, what if we saw Bitcoin actually pull back to, like, maybe we got a 50% drawdown, kind of a mini bear market, maybe down to like the 55K area, and we could get that because we're kind of in this middle phase right now where technically the Fed easing cycle hasn't began yet, and in that kind of middle phase you could see some type of bad price action in the markets. I mean, it's definitely possible. And the thing about it is, on this move right here down to 74K, I'm calling this the tariff crisis move down. This move down washed out a lot of leverage positions in Bitcoin that a lot of people actually had the correct leverage position, but a lot of people de-risked on this move basically right at the bottom. And the reason for that being simple. This was actually a scary point in time, and this was a scary move. And people that were leveraged exposure to Bitcoin, a lot of them de-risked there because it was hard to hold your leverage through that, even though it would have been the right move as of now. I believe if we were to see some type of medium term move all the way down to like 60, 55K, I believe that even a lot of the people that were able to hold on to that leverage through this move that happened would probably get washed out on that move if it did happen. So, and then you could possibly see Bitcoin pick up again into a secondary bull market on the Fed really starting its easing cycle. And then you could see, that bull market possibly move well into 2026. All right. And I think that if that happened, that would throw a lot of people off. That is not my base case, but that is something that would be interesting. Now, um, let's talk about the cycles in general. Are we still in the Bitcoin 4-year cycle? The very interesting part about that question is that at this point in time, we really can't know because there is evidence that we are no longer in the cycles and the cycles are done as well. The cycles as they were are now done and changing, and there's also good evidence that no, this looks just like the Bitcoin 4-year cycle, and there's no reason to think that that's not playing out. So let's talk about both of those views. Now, the Bitcoin 4-year cycle being done kind of would make sense when you think about the adoption cycle of Bitcoin, and with all of the institutional adoption, and Bitcoin really seems to be in a different, more mature place in its adoption cycle. And something similar to like Amazon. All right, let's pull up this Amazon chart real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. So if you look at the Amazon weekly chart, right, you had the extreme hype cycle volatility in the beginning, and then Amazon matured in its curve of adoption, and you could see this whole area right here for about 2 decades. Amazon kind of just did the stair step upwards. All right, you didn't have these huge bubbles and collapses. You had a more methodical staircase move upwards with corrections in between. So if the cycles are done and Bitcoin has moved into a different stage of its adoption, that could be what that would look like. All right. And honestly, what we've gotten so far off the bottom, it does look like that so far. We're getting more methodical movement upwards with long consolidations. We haven't seen any real type of parabolic hype cycle type movement in Bitcoin this cycle yet. All right. So from those aspects, it would make sense that we've entered into uh, a new type of environment for Bitcoin and the cycles. Now, if we want to look at the opinion that the 4-year cycles are still intact and it's still playing out. Oh, I forgot to mention one other thing about the view that the cycles are done is that we've got the new all-time high prior to the halving. Now, some people would say that that's more just the cycles rhyming, and that's not a big difference. I tend to think that's a pretty big difference, but again, we don't know for sure yet. We're gonna have to watch it play out. All right. So now let's think about it from the view that no, this is the cycle just playing out perfectly. One thing we can look at is if we come to this chart right here, this is the Bitcoin cycles overlaid from cycle peak, which I think is the best way to look at them. And you can see the bottoms here, and where Bitcoin currently is, it's actually literally right on track with the 4-year cycle. All right. So this is why I'm saying that where we are currently, there's arguments for both sides, and we're not really going to know until after it plays out. But one thing that I would be looking for here is that if the 4-year cycle is playing out, then Bitcoin should be ready to go parabolic. It's just that simple. If the 4-year cycle is playing out, then this should be about the time that we would see Bitcoin really start to go parabolic and go into its kind of last parabolic phase of the 4-year cycle and top out, sometime towards the end of this year. If that does not happen, then most likely that's just more evidence that the cycles are done. Bitcoin is a macro global asset now, and it's going to trade in a different way going forward. All right. So kind of bringing it back to where we are currently, again, I do not think personally that the cycle top is in here. I don't think this is a double top similar to 2020, 2021 for the reasons I outlined, and I do more so expect Bitcoin to continue upwards here. The manner in which it does so, we'll have to see, but that is my base case. So, if we kind of just, before we end off the video, we might as well go ahead and take a look at the technicals here on the weekly chart. And I've been talking about this potential huge inverse head and shoulders here, and we've got that purple trend line as the neckline. Talked about the initial rejection there, which was normal. It's now potentially trying to reattack that neckline. I would like to see a nice break there. And also Bitcoin on the pullback here on the weekly, it was actually just retesting this horizontal level of the previous zone of the previous high, and you can see that this last weekly candle looks pretty good with a long wick that ended up turning green, and now we're getting a big bounce to start the week. So as of now, this looks like a break of that level, retesting it, trying to turn it to support. Now hopefully the resumption upwards. So as far as the technicals here on the weekly chart, everything still looks pretty bullish. We'll start getting worried if Bitcoin does lose this horizontal level, and then if it starts losing these trend lines. All right, and that's what we got for the Bitcoin cycles and where I think we are currently, and we'll see what happens.